I have something for you to ponder today. Everyone is looking for God. You may be an atheist, a scientist, a mathematician, a philosopher, or a religious person. You may have desires for material things, knowledge, power, fame, or even renunciation. In all cases, you are looking for God. People think that God is only found in churches, mosques, or temples. But actually, God is everywhere, in everything, and in everyone. If you study the universe through physics, chemistry, biology, genetics, mathematics, or any field of science, you are studying God. The entire universe and everything in it is the external energy of God. All that you see, feel, touch, and experience is God. When you desire worldly things, abundance, wealth, you're desiring God. When you desire love, happiness, and peace, you want God. When you want fame and power, well, in that case, you're serving your master, the mind and the ego, which control you at every step and were designed by God. So the question really is, why were we placed in this world, in this body-mind organism that disconnects us from God and doesn't let us see things as they are? Why are we not able to perceive that what we're seeking is actually God? The answer is actually in plain sight. It is choice, so that we may choose to be either the controller, the enjoyer, and the owner of all that we can acquire, or to realize that none of this actually belongs to us. It never has and never will. My house, my car, my mind, my body, and my family are with me for a short time, and then we part ways. Things disintegrate. People leave or eventually die. We can't hold on to anything. We can enjoy our senses for a few years, and then even the power of our senses diminishes. Ultimately, we realize the sad truth that nothing in this world made me happy, nothing fulfilled me, and nothing lasted forever. The earlier we realize this, the better, for then we can begin seeking God. We can try and find that which is real and go beyond the illusion. Those who believe that God is energy, the universe, or the light, are drawn towards the impersonal aspects of God. But like it or not, they're still seeking God. God is impersonal, but God is also personal. You cannot put God into a box constructed by your thoughts and say that God can only be one thing and not another. God is everything, all possibilities, all things, all paths, all ways lead to God. If God can be impersonal, then God can also be personal. A being of incredible beauty, of intense love, of profound wisdom, and who at the same time cares for us, regardless of whether we believe or not, whether we follow or not, whether we understand or not. The path of bhakti or divine love shows us how to understand God, how to love God, how to serve God, and how to devote ourselves to God. Why devotion? Because without devotion, you cannot achieve anything, either material or spiritual. If you wish to achieve the highest attainment of spirituality, which is love of God, if you want to see God, if you want to embrace God, if you want to enjoy a relationship with God, and if you want to return home to God, then it will take a lot of commitment and devotion. This is not a part-time activity. This is the meaning, the purpose, and the ultimate goal of life. Over the past few episodes, we've been reading from the Bhagavatam about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who appeared on this earth around 5000 BC in Vrindavan, India. Through his activities, or Leela, we learned what God looks like, what he does, and all the different ways in which he can be in a loving relationship with him. Let us go back in time to that spiritual world. one day, Krishna and his brother Balaram, along with their friends, went a good distance away from their hometown, Vrindavan, while they were herding the cows. Now, if you're new here, you need to know that Krishna is around 7 or 8 years old at this point, I think. And they're out herding the cows. That's what he did. They were a community of cowherd people. They raised cows, and they were a dairy community. And when the sun's heat became intense, Krishna saw that the trees were acting as umbrellas, shading him. How often have you noticed and watched how nature interacts with us? How nature is there for us in so many different ways. Right? So Krishna is noticing how the trees are actually acting as umbrellas, shading him. On a hot summer day. We're all in summer now, and it's been getting really hot. So the trees are there blessing us with their presence, showing us that they care for us, that in fact they're trying to cool things down a bit, and we can take shelter of them. Krishna said to his friends, "Oh friends, just see these greatly fortunate trees whose lives are completely dedicated to the benefit of others." Think about this. Even while tolerating the wind, rain, heat, and snow, they protect us from these elements. Just see how these trees are maintaining every living entity. Their birth is successful. Their behavior is just like that of great personalities. For anyone who asks anything from a tree never goes away disappointed. These trees fulfill one's desires with their leaves, flowers, and fruits, their shade, roots, bark, and wood, and also their fragrance, sap, ashes, pulp, and shoots. It is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words. I really want to bring this point home, that it is the duty of all of us, of every living being, to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with our life, with our wealth, with our intelligence, and with our words. What does it mean to perform welfare activities? Is it just about giving in charity? No, it's actually a lot more than that. It's about caring. It's about caring for others. It's about wanting to serve the community, wanting to serve people, wanting to be there for others. As our world becomes more and more self-absorbed, and as we start becoming more and more narcissistic, as you go on Instagram and you notice all these different people posing with their cameras and trying in some way or other to impress the world as to how great they are and how wonderful their life is, you realize they're not living in the service of others. They're part of a look at me movement. Look at how great I am. Look at how great my life is. And it's all about me, 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 me. And that obsession with me, with oneself, I, me, and mine, is the downfall, the spiritual downfall of any human being. Because as long as we are in the service of me, we will experience all the results of karma, the karma of taking, the karma of wanting to use, the karma of wanting to manipulate, enjoy, extract from the world and from others. It is when we give to the world that we cultivate good karma. It is when we give to others that we cultivate good karma, which in turn leads to all kinds of good things coming to us. But when we are busy enjoying, we are simply expending our good karma of the past, and we are deleting our bank balance, so to speak. Karma works like that. Yeah, go ahead, enjoy. But you're using up whatever goodness you accumulated from the past. So by being of service, not only are we doing good karma for ourselves, but we're also helping make the world a better place. And that's what the trees are doing. And that's what Krishna is pointing out here, is that the trees are there to are serving others with everything they've got, with every part of their body, with everything that they do. Thus moving among the trees whose branches were bent low by their abundance of twigs, fruits, flowers, and leaves, Krishna came to the Yamuna River. Now think of the trees bending low is something you'll uniquely see in Vrindavan. Vrindavan is Krishna's place. This is where he grew up, and this is right near New Delhi in India. It is a phenomenal place. There is, in fact, I would say, no place like it. True that it is now subjected to tremendous heat and tremendous cold, and true that it is an austerity to live there. True that a lot of people have started going there and it's become extremely crowded. However, the energy of Vrindavan is alive and vibrant. And that energy, that spiritual energy, if you know how to find it and extract it, is like no other place on earth. It is one of the most profoundly, it is the most profoundly spiritual place on earth. It is the place where Krishna performed all his Leela, his pastimes. So now, in our narrative here, he's come to the Yamuna River. And at the river, the cowherd boys, that is his friends, let the cows drink the clear, cool, and wholesome water of the Yamuna. The cowherd boys themselves also drank that sweet water to their full satisfaction. And it's a tragedy that in today's time, that same Yamuna River has been so polluted. But these are our beautiful cows that we have in India. They give the best milk in the world. And this has actually been proven. Their ghee, their milk, their butter, their yogurt is considered the finest in the world. And there's Krishna sitting with all his cows. So Krishna and his friends arrived at the Yamuna River and were enjoying themselves there. Then the cowherd boys began herding the animals in a leisurely way within a small forest along the Yamuna. But soon they became afflicted by hunger and approached Krishna and Balaram. Balaram's Krishna's brother, and they spoke as follows. They said, "O Balaram, O Krishna, we are being harassed by hunger, and you should do something about it." You see, they'd gone far away from their village, so they were extra hungry. Normally they brought something with them, but they were extra hungry today. Entreated by the cowherd boys, the supreme Godhead, Krishna said. So now, here's another interesting term if you're new. Krishna is the supreme Godhead. Many people question me about this. Oh, but Shiva is the supreme Godhead. Oh, Vishnu is the supreme. And the truth is, it's not my opinion or your opinion or anyone's opinion that matters. It is the opinion of the Bhagavad Gita, the opinion of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the opinion of the Vedas. That is what we will refer to. And in all the Vedas, it is made clear, the Vedas are the books of knowledge from India, the ancient texts written by the rishis, the sages, where they wrote exactly who the incarnations of Vishnu are. And in all those 24 incarnations mentioned earlier on in the Bhagavatam, there is only one which says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. You are yourself Bhagavan. Bhagavan means the supreme being, the supreme Godhead, the source of everything. And Krishna says the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita. He confirms it. And the same thing is said by Brahma. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. Krishna is the Param Ishwar, the supreme controller. Think about it. We all like to control. We want to be in control, not only of our lives, but if we have a partner, with their life, with our work, with everything, we want to be in control. If we had our way, we'd want to control the weather. We would control the politics of the country. We would control everything we could get our hands on. We'd control the traffic. We'd control everything. But we're not in control. And life shows us that, and life teaches us that we're not in control. And the more we begin to understand that, the more we can begin to grow spiritually, because we realize I'm not the controller, I'm not the enjoyer, and I'm not the owner of anything. So Krishna says to his friends, the cowherd boys, please go to the sacrificial arena where a group of Brahmins are now performing a fire sacrifice. Fire sacrifice is known as a yajna. And their aim, of course, is to gain promotion to the heavenly planets. This is what a fire sacrifice looks like, a yajna. In the past, many rishis would perform such yajnas. Hundreds of them would gather around the fire, and they would offer ghee, and they would offer all kinds of things into the fire. And with tremendous prayers and worship and devotion, they would seek to purify themselves, their mind, their heart, their bodies. And this practice carries on till this day. So the boys went up to the Brahmins, where they were performing the yajna, the fire sacrifice, and they submitted their request. They stood before the Brahmins with palms joined in supplication, and then fell flat on the ground to offer respect. Now, Brahmins are the priests. They're considered very evolved. They're supposed to be very intelligent. They're very conversant in the scriptures, in books like the Srimad Bhagavatam. They're supposed to know dharma, what is right, what is wrong, what should be done, what should not be done, all of that. However, they're very absorbed in their aim of elevating themselves to the heavenly planets. So when the boys said to them, "O earthly gods," they spoke with great reverence and respect. They said, "Please hear us. We cowherd boys are executing the orders of Krishna and Balaram. We wish all good for you." Krishna and Balaram are tending their cows not far from here. They are hungry and want you to give them some of your food. Therefore, O Brahmins, O best of the knowers of dharma, if you have faith, please give some food to them. Now, I know it's not the custom in the Western world to necessarily invite people in to have food, just, random people you don't even know. It's not our custom in the West to be able to just open our doors to anyone who might be hungry. But in the East, especially in India, it is very much the custom. I remember even my own grandmother, actually, before she would eat, she would go downstairs and look around. If there was any hungry person, she would call them and give them some food to eat before she would sit down to eat. And I was very touched by this. I was like, wow, what a different way of living. What an incredible way to live your life. That you first engage in serving others and then you serve yourself. But these Brahmins, even though they're supposed to know these things and they're supposed to be learned, in fact, the custom was always, if somebody came to your house, especially if somebody came to your house, they would treat them as atithi deva bhava. That is, they would treat them as if God has come to my house. Someone who you know, you don't give that kind of treatment to it. If somebody you don't know shows up, you give them all the more respect. You don't know. That person could be God showing up at your door. Could be. You never know. It's happened in the past. So the Brahmins heard, but refused to pay heed. Indeed, they were full of petty desires and entangled in elaborate rituals. Though presuming themselves wise and advanced in Vedic knowledge, they were actually inexperienced and foolish. They saw Krishna as an ordinary human and failed to recognize him as the absolute, supreme, absolute truth. The directly manifest personality of Godhead, whom the material senses cannot ordinarily perceive. So, a lot of important things are being said here. They saw Krishna as an ordinary human. Most people do. Most people ask questions like, how is it possible for a little boy to lift up a hill or kill demons? Or why would he have so many girlfriends? And, so many questions are there. But if you start from the idea that Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, as stated in all the Vedic literatures, as stated by all the saintly people, if you don't distort their words, if you just listen to what they're actually saying, you will discover they are saying this. He is the supreme absolute truth, the directly manifest personality of Godhead, the supreme being. And the material senses cannot ordinarily perceive him because he has a transcendental form. Sat Chit Ananda, his form is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. It is not made of physical elements like our form is. We have a human body, and the human body is made of blood and bones and all kinds of other ingredients, skin and hair and all of that, but not God's body, not Krishna's body. Krishna says he descends to this world in his original transcendental form. Why does he need to take a material body? He doesn't. We have material bodies, so we may experience what we are not. We may experience what it is like to be human. Human means that which we are not. We can experience the unrealness of this world. We can have all our desires, try to fulfill them, try to do whatever we want. We've been given this vehicle. This is like a car. We inhabit it. We enter it at the time of birth. We leave it at the time of death. So we get to be here and then use this body to enjoy our senses and enjoy life and have a good time until we finally figure out that doesn't work. It's not quite like that. We're not able to. We never quite get what we want. It's like a person in a desert chasing a mirage. They want the water, but they're not able to ever find it. They're never able to reach it. There's only the mirage, and then another mirage, and then another mirage, until that person drops down dead in the desert, dying of thirst. And we too are thirsty and hungry and longing and desiring. So when the Brahmins failed to reply with a simple yes or no, the boys returned disappointed to Krishna and Balaram and reported this to them. Hearing what had happened, Krishna, the Supreme Godhead, the Lord of the universe, simply laughed. He said, "Tell the wives of the Brahmins that I have come here with Balaram. They will certainly give you all the food you want, for they are most affectionate." Snigdha toward me. Snigdha means deep affection, tremendous of affection. Sneha towards me. So when they have that kind of affection, they'll do anything for me. Indeed, with their intelligence, with their mind, they reside in me alone. Means they're always thinking about me. In the purport, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the reason Krishna did not have the cowherd boys tell the Brahmins' wives that he was hungry is that he knew this would severely distress them. Simply out of affection for Krishna, however, they would be happy to give all the food he had requested. They would not heed their husband's prohibition since they resided within Krishna through their transcendental intelligence. So there are a number of things that's going to happen. Their husbands will try to stop them, but they're not going to heed their husband's words. And they have been so deeply immersed in thinking of Krishna for all this time, and this is the first time they're going to meet him. And that is what is referred to here as transcendental intelligence. What is transcendental means? That which causes us to transcend. What causes us to transcend? Not just giving yourself the label spiritual, not just saying, I believe in energy. No, that's not going to cause you to transcend. To be able to transcend means to rise beyond the miseries of the world, to transcend the world, to transcend your mind, to transcend your ego, to transcend your body, and its pleasures and pains. It's not just the pains we want to transcend, it's also the pleasures and pains. They go both together. If you are attached to your body for the pleasures, well, then you'll also have to endure the pain. It goes together. But one who has transcended is no longer attached to the body or the mind or the ego. And therefore, they experience life at a different vibrational frequency. They experience life in a way that is not experienced by ordinary people. They may be here in the body, just like all of us, but they're experiencing life in an entirely different way. So the cowherd boys went to the house where the Brahmins' wives were staying. The ladies were sitting nicely, decorated with fine ornaments. Bowing down to them, the boys addressed them in all humility. They said, "Obeisance is unto you, O wives of the learned Brahmins. Kindly hear our words. We have been sent here by Krishna, who is passing by not far from here. He has come a long way tending the cows. Now he is hungry, so some food should be given for him and his companions." The wives of the Brahmins were always eager to see Krishna, for their minds had been enchanted by descriptions of him. In other words, they'd been hearing about him. They'd heard about him from lots of people. And they were enchanted by descriptions of him. Thus, as soon as they heard that he had come, they became very excited. Taking along in large vessels 4 kinds of food full of fine tastes and aromas, all the ladies went forth to meet their beloved, just as rivers flow towards the sea. This indeed is the attitude of a devotee, that we recognize that we are all searching for God, and that when he is there, we become like the rivers flowing towards the sea. We're going back to our source, back to our home, back to our beloved. You see? And this was the mood of the wives of the Brahmins. Although their husbands, brothers, sons, and other relatives tried to forbid them from going, their hope of seeing Krishna, cultivated by extensive hearing of his transcendental qualities, won out. That hope won. Along the river Yamuna, within a garden decorated with buds of ashok trees, they caught sight of him, strolling along in the company of cowherd boys and his elder brother, Balaram. This is what they saw. Krishna and his friends. And then they came up to them, bringing with them the food that they had brought. And they fed them personally. His complexion was dark blue and his garment golden. Wearing a peacock feather, colored minerals, sprigs of flower buds, and a garland of forest flowers and leaves, he was dressed just like a dramatic dancer. He rested one hand upon the shoulder of a friend, and with the other he twirled a lotus. Lilies graced his ears, his hair hung down over his cheeks, and his lotus-like face was smiling. That's Krishna on the right and his brother Balaram. For a long time, the Brahmin ladies had heard about Krishna, their beloved, and his glories had become the constant ornaments of their ears. Look at the expressions used here. His glories had become the constant ornament of their ears. What do you wear in your ears? If you're a woman, you might wear an earring. Maybe a gold earring, maybe a diamond and gold earring. That's the way you ornament your ears. But the real ornament is hearing about Krishna, Shravanam. His glories nourish us from within. What happens is when we hear about Krishna, it's like our soul wakes up. Our soul, which was dormant, our soul is dormant for the most part, but it only wakes up when there is something truly spiritual in front of us that enters through our senses, that enters through our ears or our eyes. And then the soul wakes up. Hey, you're talking about my stuff. This is the stuff I like hearing about. You might like watching movies, and you might like hearing about other things and songs and latest, stuff, whatever it is, the big hits of the time. But the soul, your soul, you, the real you, isn't interested in that stuff. It's interested in hearing about that which is truly spiritual, that which reminds us or reminds it about who we are, that which reminds it about where we come from. And that is perfectly embodied in Krishna. So when they would hear about him, he became the ornament of their ears. Indeed, their minds were always absorbed in him. Through the apertures of their eyes, they now forced him to enter within their hearts. They were literally drinking him in with their eyes into their hearts. And then they embraced him within for a long time. In this way, they finally gave up the pain of separation from him, just as sages give up the anxiety of false ego by embracing their innermost consciousness. A sage is one who has given up the anxiety of false ego. What is false ego? So ego is the identity. This is the most precious thing a human being has, your identity. If you lose track of who you are, what your name is, what your gender is, what your history is, where you came from, where you were born, who your parents were, your life story, all of those things that made you who you are today, if you lose track of that, if your memory somehow collapses, you will not know who you are. And as a result, you will not be able to function in this world. You are a product of all the memories that you have and all that you remember and all that you've learned and all that you've accumulated. But all of that is just accumulated knowledge, accumulated experience, accumulated stuff. And that accumulation, it becomes what is your ego. This is who you think you are. You think you're a man or a woman, you're fat or you're thin or you're smart or you're stupid or you're ugly or you're beautiful. Those are the conclusions you arrive at. You're worthy, you're unworthy, you're good enough, not good enough, you're right, you're wrong. All of that is the accumulated false ego. Why false? Because it's not the real thing. The real thing, the real ego, the real self, the real identity has been sitting quietly witnessing this entire drama. It's like a person sitting in a movie theater witnessing and watching the movie. So just as sages give up the anxiety of false ego, why is it anxiety? Why is the false ego anxiety? Is it full of anxiety? It is. Look at all of us. We're all anxious. We're anxious about paying our bills. We're anxious about, are we going to make it safely somewhere? Hey, drive safe, we tell each other. We're anxious. We're worried. We're worried about our politics. We're worried about our economics. We're worried about our global situation, what's going on with the environment. We're worried about all kinds of things. We're anxious because we're identified with this body and mind. And as a result of which, we cannot progress spiritually. Until you let go the false ego, you cannot find the real identity, the real self. You cannot find it. So sages give up the anxiety of false ego by embracing their innermost consciousness. You can't just give up the false ego. You must find something better. You must find something which will be even superior to the material identity. And only then can you give up the false ego. Just like a child gives up their toys when they grow up. When they grow up, they drive a real car, not the toy car. They live in a real house, not just the little Barbie doll house or whatever else, right? They have grown up things, no longer the child things. In much the same way, if we're going to give up the false ego, we must have something better, superior to it. And that is our innermost consciousness. That is our spiritual identity. And that is our connection with God. So through the apertures of their eyes, they've now forced him to enter within their hearts. And they embraced him within for a long time. In this way, they finally gave up the pain of separation from him, just as sages give up the anxiety of false ego by embracing their innermost consciousness. Krishna, who witnesses the thoughts of all creatures, because he's seated in everyone's heart, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am seated in everyone's heart. From me alone comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So Krishna, who witnesses the thoughts of all creatures, understood how these ladies had abandoned all worldly hopes and come here simply to see him. With a smile on his face, he said, "Welcome, O most fortunate ladies. Please sit down and make yourselves comfortable. What can I do for you? That you have come here to see me is most appropriate." So let me explain this a little bit. They had come to the place where the fire sacrifice, the yajna, was taking place to assist their husbands in the performance of those duties and responsibilities. And now they had walked away from that most important fire sacrifice, which their husbands were doing, abandoned them, deserted them, and gone away to see Krishna, who their husbands did not understand even who he is or why they should even feed him. And they had literally shooed away the boys. And now Krishna is telling her, or telling them, that you have come to see me is most appropriate. See, they had done the most inappropriate thing according to their husbands. And here Krishna is reassuring them, no, what you have done by coming to see me is most appropriate. In the purport it is written, Krishna welcomed the Brahmins' wives, whose pure love for him was proved by their overcoming many hindrances to see him. They had rejected their husbands' orders, but according to Krishna, their behavior was not at all inappropriate, since their husbands had obviously tried to obstruct their loving service to him. Certainly, expert personalities who understand their true interest render unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service or bhakti directly unto me, for I am most dear to the soul. Read that again. Certainly, expert personalities who understand their own true interest. See, expert personalities who understand their own true interest render unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service directly unto me, for I am most dear to the soul. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, right in the beginning, when we first started, there was in the first canto, the second chapter, text number 6, it was written, the supreme occupation, the supreme dharma for all humanity is that by which we can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. And by the self, we mean the soul. You see, the body, the mind can never be satisfied. You might eat today, you'll be satisfied, and in a few hours, you'll again be hungry. Your mind is never satisfied, no matter how much you've got. You might be a billionaire. You might have $100 or $1,000 billion. You might have $1 trillion. Your mind will never be satisfied. You will always want more. There is always more and always more and always more. It's never satisfied. But the soul can be completely satisfied. See, it's not interested in all these material things. It's not interested in any of the worldly stuff. It's not interested in all the pleasures of the world. It's not interested in anything of this world any more than a fish is satisfied by giving it a TV set to watch. Take out the fish from the water, put him on a nice recliner in a beautiful movie theater, give it a nice drink, wonderful, let's call that a cocktail drink. Let's give it a nice cigar to smoke and say, hey, fish, enjoy. You deserved it. You've been swimming around all your life in the ocean and in the water. You deserve to be happy, fish. And put him there in that chair, movie theater. The fish is dying. He cannot sit there. He cannot enjoy your things. He's of no interest. The fish needs the water. The soul, your soul, you, the real you, is uninterested in the world. What it is interested in is this: spiritual wisdom, spiritual truths, things that light it up from within. But this kind of hearing, this kind of service, this kind of devotion needs to be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the soul. What does this mean, unmotivated? I'm not doing this because there's something in it for me. Everything people do in this world is because, what's in it for me? They're always looking out for what's their gain. What will I get out of this? If I'm going to be with this person, if I'm going to go to this place, what's in it for me? But unmotivated is the opposite of that. There is no motive. Unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service, devotion to God. Only that will completely satisfy the soul. That's what it's saying here. So Krishna continues, it is only by contact with the self, with the soul, that one's vital breath, intelligence, mind, friends, body, friend, children, wife, children, wealth, and so on are dear. So what's he saying here? It's only with contact, as long as the soul is present within your body, that you're able to breathe, that your mind is able to function, that you're able to have any intelligence at all. It is only by contact with the soul that you are alive enough to call someone your friend or your wife or your child. It is only when you're in contact with this body can you say, I have this wealth and all the things that you hold dear. But as soon as the soul leaves the body, finished. It's of no use. None of this is of any use. Therefore, what object can possibly be more dear than one's own self? Now, be very careful here. The self referred to here is not the egoic self. When people talk of self-love, unfortunately, most of them gravitate towards narcissism. They think self-love means, I got to love my body. I've got to love my eyelashes. I've got to love my nose. I've got to love my whatever, right? I've got to think that I'm worthy. I've got to think that I'm good enough. No, utter nonsense. You are not good enough. You never were good enough. You never will be good enough. Because we are all unworthy. We are all not good enough. We will never be good enough. We are tiny little miserable creatures on this earth. We are unhappy by nature. We are constantly going towards the negative. We are constantly going towards stuff that is not good for us. We eat unhealthy foods. We do unhealthy things. We do things that do not stimulate the soul and the self, that do not bring us true happiness. We do not know what is our self-interest. So all these things that people are doing in the name of self-love are only leading to narcissism. Real self-love does exist. That's when you understand that the self is love. Its quality is that it is love. But true love is unmotivated, is uninterrupted, does not have a beginning and an end. True love is not something I love you today and tomorrow I'm not in love with you anymore. That's not love. It never was love. If love has a beginning and an end, then it is not love. True love does not have a motive. If there's something that you want out of the other person, it is not love. It is manipulation. You're trying to get something. It is barter. It is trade. Try and understand that. Real self-love is when you understand that the self is love and that it is in love with God. And that is its ultimate beloved. And that ultimate beloved and you have a relationship. And it's time to revive that. Krishna then said, you should thus return to the sacrificial arena because your husbands, the learned Brahmins, are householders and they need your assistance. By the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them down in the chat. I'll take up all questions at the end, so please feel free to write down your questions. Write them as you think of them, and keep writing. The ladies replied, O Almighty One, please do not speak such cruel words. Why are these words cruel? Because he's asking them to go back. Rather, you should fulfill your promise that you will always reciprocate with your devotees. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually says this. He says, Ye yatha mam prapadyante. That to that degree which you surrender unto me, tams tathaiva bhajami aham. All of them as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. It's very interesting to see. Krishna rewards us according to how we reach out to him. If you don't want to reach out to him, no problem. He will not force you, nor will he try to impose on you. That's not his way. But when you do reach out to him, to the degree that you reach out to him, in the way that you reach out to him, he will reciprocate with you. If you want to put in only this much energy, then he'll reciprocate this much. If you want to put in that much or more or more or more, then he will reciprocate in that way. It says in the purport, everyone is searching for Krishna. He is partially realized in his impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence, or some people call that the light. He's partially realized in the impersonal effulgence. Why? Because you're only getting to know a part of him. You're only getting to know an aspect of him. And he's also known as the Paramatma, the Supersoul, who is dwelling within everyone and everything, including the particles of atoms. But Krishna is fully realized by his pure devotees. He explains this here. Krishna is the objective of everyone's spiritual realization, and he satisfies everyone according to their desire. So, if all you want is mukti, liberation from suffering, then you can have that. You can have that. You want to merge in the light? You can have that. You want to go to some heavenly planet where you can have great enjoyment? You can have that. But the real thing, right? Or rather, before I get there, if you want to experience him in everyone, you can do that. You want to experience him everywhere, you can do that. But the real thing, if you want to really realize him in his fullest glory, then that can only be done by someone who is a pure devotee. And pure devotee means that they have, as we said earlier, that their devotion, firstly that they're devoted, and secondly that that devotion is unmotivated and uninterrupted. There's no beginning or end. It is constant, constantly thinking about Krishna. So Krishna is the objective of everyone's spiritual realization, and he satisfies everyone according to their desire. In the transcendental world, one devotee may want him as the supreme master, another as a personal friend, another as his son, and still another as his lover or her lover. Krishna rewards all the devotees equally according to their different intensities of love for him. The Brahmin's wives continued, now that we have attained your lotus feet, we simply wish to remain here in the forest so we may carry upon our heads the garlands of tulsi leaves that fall from your lotus feet. We are ready to give up all material relationships. What do you think happens when someone gives their all to God, when they're willing to give up the entire world, everything they own, everything that they love, everyone that is dear and everything that is dear. What do you think happens? Meera said it beautifully. She says, I gave all of myself and he gave me all of himself. She's referring to Krishna. He gave me all of himself. When I gave myself, I am this tiny fragment, little tiny imperfect, flawed being. I gave all of myself. But what did he give me? He gave me all of himself, and he is the infinite, the most perfect, the most incredibly beautiful, the most incredibly wise. He gave me all of himself. She says that this was a great deal. It's like you went, shopping and you got something that normally costs, let's say, $1,000, and you got it for $1. Like, wow. And you always wanted this. And it's the most beautiful and the most incredible thing. And you got it for dirt cheap. How excited would you be? They continue, our husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, and relatives and friends will no longer take us back. And how could anyone else be willing to give us shelter? In other words, you're our only shelter. Therefore, since we have thrown ourselves at your lotus feet and have no other destination, please grant our desire. The Supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna, replied, rest assured that your husbands will not be inimical toward you, nor will your fathers, brothers, sons, other relatives, or the general populace. I will personally advise them of the situation. Indeed, even the demigods will express their approval. For you to remain with me would certainly not please people in this world. Nor would it be the best way for you to increase your love for me. Rather, you should fix your minds upon me, and very soon you will achieve me. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mamevaishyasi satyam te pratijani priyosi me. This is a very, very important verse. Krishna is saying here, Manmana bhava mad bhakto. So a lot of people think and try to interpret Krishna's words according to their own fancy, and they try to make it, well, you need to surrender to the principle of divinity, let's say. It's not what he's saying. He's saying very clearly, your mind, man mana bhava mad bhakto, become my bhakta. Mad bhakto, mad means my bhakta, my devotee. Always think of me. Become my devotee, mad bhakta. Worship me, mad yaji. Mad means mine, me. He's not talking about some principle. He's talking about himself. People want to distort, and that's where it's so dangerous. A lot of the teachings that are out there are dangerous because they distort what Krishna is saying. Anyone who knows even a little bit of Hindi knows what Krishna is saying here. Offer your homage unto me. Mam namaskuru. Namaste, namaskar, mam namaskuru. Offer your namaskar to me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this. Pratijani. Pratigya, you've heard this word if you know Hindi. Pratigya means I take a vow. I make a solemn oath. I take a promise. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. Priyo si me. Priya means beloved. Si me. Me means me. You are my very dear friend. There is a lover and a beloved. There always has to be that. Because you are my very dear friend. So the invitation is for you and me and for all of us to become the very dear friend of God. To become the lover, the beloved of God. And then can you imagine what that would be like? Then he mentions the process. He says, by hearing about me, Shravana, by seeing my deity, Darshan, by meditating upon me, Dhyana, and by chanting my names and glories, Kirtana, that love for me develops. So these are the processes he's giving you. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. Shravan means by hearing about him. Darshan means by seeing his picture or his deity, by meditating upon me, dhyana, by chanting my names and glories, kirtan. That love for me develops, not by physical proximity. Therefore, please go back to your homes. Thus instructed, the ladies returned to the place of sacrifice. The Brahmins, their husbands, did not find any fault with their wives, and together with them they finished the sacrifice. One of the ladies had been forcibly kept back by her husband. When she heard the others describe Krishna, she embraced him within her heart and gave up her material body, which is the basis of bondage to material activity. So once she heard what had happened, she was like so enthralled, she actually left her body. Yogis have been known to do this, to at will leave their body. And Krishna says that whatever you remember at the time of leaving this body, to that state you will attain. Meaning, if she left her body thinking about Krishna, then she would have completely gone back to him eternally, always. That is how we train ourselves. We train ourselves. Why do we chant a mantra? Why do we repeat again and again the names of God? Because then those become embedded in our mind. Why do we keep hearing about him? So that becomes the lila, the pastime, become ingrained within us. So that when there is turmoil, when there is danger, when there is death, we will remember him. And when we remember him, we go to him. It's a very simple formula. Govinda, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, fed the cowherd boys the food the ladies had brought. Then the all-powerful Supreme Lord himself ate the preparations. Thus, Krishna, appearing like a human being to perform his pastimes, imitated the ways of human society. He enjoyed pleasing his cows, cowherd friends, cowherd boys and girlfriends, and with his beauty, with his words and actions. The Brahmins then came to their senses. The Brahmins, the men, right, who had shunned the boys earlier, came to their senses and began to feel great remorse. They thought, we have sinned, for we have denied the request of Krishna and Balaram, the two lords of the universe, who deceptively appeared as ordinary human beings. Now their eyes are opening up. Taking note of their wives' pure transcendental devotion for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and seeing their own lack of devotion, the Brahmins felt most sorrowful and began to condemn themselves. The Brahmins said, to hell with our threefold birth, our vow of celibacy and our extensive learning. To hell with our aristocratic background and our expertise in the rituals of sacrifice. These are all condemned because we were inimical to the transcendental personality of Godhead. In the purport it says the words Trivrid Janma, or threefold birth, refers to physical birth, then the Brahminical initiation that Brahmins go through, and then the initiation into the performance of Vedic yagya or sacrifice. Everything is useless if one is ignorant about the absolute truth, the Supreme Being, Sri Krishna. They said, Maya, the illusory potency of the Supreme Lord, the illusion that bewilders us all, bewilders even great mystics, what to speak of us. As Brahmins, we are supposed to be spiritual masters of all classes of people, yet we have been bewildered about our own real interest. Just see the unlimited love these women have developed for Krishna, who is the spiritual master, the guru of the entire universe. This love has broken for them the very bonds of death, their attachment to family life. It's a very important part here. The unlimited love these women have developed. You see, it's very difficult for men to develop this caliber of love because men tend to be more logical, not as emotional. It's very hard. Some men are able to, but for most men tend to be more intellectual, more thinking in terms of logic and philosophy and all of that. Whereas women tend to have more of a heart, more emotional. That emotion that women feel so deeply, so intensely, is their greatest asset. It is what makes them develop the highest forms of love for Krishna and for God. And these Brahmins are appreciating their wives and seeing that they have developed something that even despite all their learning and everything, they have not been able to do. And that love that they've developed, their wives have developed, has broken the very bonds of death, their attachment to this world and to family life. These women, they said, have never undergone the purificatory rites of Brahmins, nor have they lived in the ashram of a spiritual master or guru, nor have they executed austerities, speculated on the nature of the self, followed the formalities of cleanliness, or engaged in pious rituals, meaning the kind of stuff that Brahmins have to go through as part of their training. Nevertheless, they have firm devotion for Krishna, whose glories are chanted by the exalted hymns of the Vedas, and who is the supreme master of all masters of mystic power. We, on the other hand, have no such devotion, although we have executed all these processes. So this is what they're doing is very profound. A devotee tries to focus on where their flaws are and develops a deep sense of humility about their flaws. You know how they say in the world, if you want to get anywhere, you have to be very confident. To be very confident, you must know your strengths, you must know what is good about you, and you must be able to tell others. Well, that doesn't work in spiritual life. It works the other way around. If you can see your flaws, if you can deeply recognize how imperfect you are, how much you lack devotion, how much you're incapable of doing anything, the more you're able to go there, the more humility you will develop, and the more humility you have, the deeper will be your calling out to God. Prabhupada says one should chant the name of God in a humble state of mind, just like a child crying out for its mother. Chaitanya says one should chant in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself to be lower than the straw in the street. In other words, people trample all over the straw. More tolerant than a tree. Right? In such a state of mind, one can chant the name of God constantly. So they continue saying, the Brahmins, indeed, infatuated as we are with our household affairs, we have deviated completely from the real aim of life. Just see how Krishna has reminded us of the ultimate destination of all true transcendentalists. Otherwise, why should the Supreme Controller, whose every desire is already fulfilled, and who is the master of liberation and all other transcendental benedictions, enact this pretense with us, who are always to be controlled by him? In other words, he is the Supreme Controller, right? That's what it means, Param Ishvara. Ishwar means controller, and the Supreme Controller is God. He is the Param Ishwar. And we are meant to be controlled by him, but instead what has happened is we want to be independent. So he gives us the rights. Fine, go ahead, be independent. When you realize that you can't really do anything independently, in every step you're dependent on him. Can my finger do anything independent of my body? No. It can try. But the more it works in harmony with the body, the finger, the hand, every part of me works in harmony with the body, with what I want, then the more it is able to be of service and the more it is able to be of use. Otherwise, it will, if it starts wanting to go its own way, then this finger will be the cause of great trouble for the entire body. When we begin to be of service to God, and through God, we begin to be of service to humanity by bringing them the information about God, then we're doing the ultimate good, para upakar, the greatest good for all humanity. So they're saying, yeah, why would the Supreme Controller, or God, whose every desire is already fulfilled, he doesn't need anything, all his desires are fulfilled, and who is the master of liberation, he's already liberated, and he is the one who gives liberation and all other transcendental benedictions. Why should he enact this pretense with us, who are always to be controlled by him? Right? They're beginning to understand he did this for a purpose, to show us something, to show us how highly evolved our wives are. We thought we're so evolved, Brahmins, priests, But their wives, because of their heart, being so attached to Krishna, they were far more evolved than their husbands. Then they say, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, perpetually worships Krishna, renouncing her pride and fickleness. So Lakshmi is known to be money or wealth, which is always brings about pride and is always very fickle. You sometimes have it, sometimes you don't. The market goes up, goes down. So in all different ways, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, is very fickle. The supreme master of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, obviously does not have to beg for food. Master of Lakshmi, that is Krishna, does not have to beg for food. And yet he came and approached the Brahmins, who are finally manifesting their real spiritual intelligence. All the aspects of sacrifice, the auspicious place and time, the various items of paraphernalia, all are simply manifestations of his opulence. Yet, even though we had heard the Supreme Godhead Vishnu, the Lord of all mystic controllers, had taken birth in the Yadu dynasty, we were so foolish that we could not recognize that Krishna was none other than him. Let us offer our obeisances unto Sri Krishna, the Supreme Godhead. His intelligence is never bewildered, whereas we were confused by his power of illusion and are simply wandering about on the paths of karmic work. We were bewildered by his illusory potency, Maya, and thus could not understand his influence. Now we hope he will kindly forgive our offense. Thus, reflecting on the sin they had committed by neglecting Krishna, they became very eager to see him. But being afraid of King Kans, they did not dare go to Vrindavan. So they were still being very controlled by the circumstances of the world there. The King Kans, if he'd got to know, he would have killed them and their families. All right, with that, we'll end for today. Are there any questions? Have any of you been contemplating these words? I see some of you have been coming here many times. You've joined us on Instagram, you've joined us on YouTube. Please share with us your thoughts. What have you been thinking? What have you felt? What have you experienced in all of this? Is there anyone who would like to share something? Well, I want to share something with you. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your being here, for all these times that you've supported me and literally held my hand through all these months and years. Thank you so much. Deeply grateful to all of you. Deeply indebted. I really know very little and have very little to offer, and yet you're here wanting to hear something. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And do remember that we're here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in India, then it's 7:30 a.m. on Wednesdays. Okay. With that then, if there's no more questions, I will see you next week. Hare Krishna.